The morning sun poured bright white light across Maplewood Lane, and Ethan Cole stood in his doorway holding a piece of pink construction paper folded in half. His hands were shaking. 5-year-old Zoe Lawson stood on his welcome mat in her bright red dress and yellow rain boots, her curly hair pulled into 2 perfect puffs on either side of her head. She had that gap-toothed grin on her face, the one that could make anyone in the world stop what they were doing and pay attention. She pointed at the paper in his hands and bounced on her toes. "Open it, Mr. Ethan. Open it." He unfolded the paper. Inside, written in wobbly crayon letters that slanted uphill and then downhill, were the words. "Will you marry my mommy? Circle yes or no." Below the words were 2 big circles drawn in purple crayon. One had "yes" written inside. The other had "no." A crayon was taped to the bottom of the page with a piece of Scotch tape. Ethan looked up from the paper. Brianna Lawson was standing right behind her daughter. She was wearing her emerald green blouse and jeans, and her long dark curly hair fell in a loose braid over one shoulder. Her brown eyes were wide open. Her lips were parted. Her beautiful face held an expression that was somewhere between horror and the desperate hope that the ground would open up and swallow her whole. She had clearly not known what was on that paper. "Zoe," Brianna whispered. "Zoe, baby, what did you?" Zoe spun around and looked up at her mother. "I wrote it in my best handwriting, Mommy. I practiced 4 times." Ethan looked at the note again. His throat was tight. His eyes were burning. And the reason his hand was shaking had nothing to do with surprise. It had everything to do with the small velvet box sitting in his jacket pocket, the one he had been carrying around for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. But to understand why that moment mattered, why a piece of pink construction paper from a 5-year-old girl could make a grown man's eyes fill with tears on a Saturday morning in Charlotte, North Carolina, you need to go back 6 months. Back to the day Ethan Cole pulled a moving truck onto Maplewood Lane with nothing but boxes, a broken heart, and a set of house keys that belonged to a dead man. 6 months earlier. The truck was too big for the street. Ethan knew that the second he turned the corner and saw the row of neat houses with their small front yards and narrow driveways. Maplewood Lane was a quiet residential street in a suburb south of Charlotte, the kind of place where people walked their dogs in the evening and waved to each other from their porches. It was not the kind of place where a 26-foot rental truck fit comfortably. He parked halfway on the street and halfway on the driveway of the pale blue house at number 412. The house had belonged to his father, Harold Cole, who had lived there for 40 years before a heart attack took him 2 years ago. Ethan had kept paying the mortgage and the lawn service, but he had not been able to bring himself to sell it. And now, after 18 months of working 100-hour weeks at Cole Digital Solutions, after watching his company grow into something worth more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, after realizing that he ate dinner alone every single night in a penthouse that felt like a very expensive cage, he had decided to move in. He stepped out of the truck and stretched. The April air was warm. The sky was clear blue, and the sunlight fell clean and bright across the yards and sidewalks. He pulled a box from the back of the truck and carried it toward the front door. That was when a rubber ball bounced across the driveway and hit his ankle. He looked down. The ball was bright pink. He looked up. A little girl in a red dress and yellow rain boots was standing at the edge of the lawn next door. She had brown skin, round cheeks, big brown eyes, and her curly hair was pulled up into 2 puffs. She looked at the ball. She looked at Ethan. She waved. "Hi. I am Zoe. That is my ball. I kicked it too hard." Ethan set the box down and picked up the ball. He walked it over to her and held it out. "Hi, Zoe. I am Ethan. I think your ball is faster than you are." Zoe took the ball and tucked it under her arm. "Are you moving into Mr. Harold's house?" The name hit him in the chest. "You knew Mr. Harold? He gave me peppermints. He was very old and very nice." She paused. "Are you old?" I am 32. That is old, Zoe said with great certainty. A voice called from the porch of the house next door. Zoe, baby, come back here. Do not bother the new neighbor. Ethan looked up. A woman stood on the porch in a coral sundress, her long dark hair in a loose braid, her brown skin warm under the bright afternoon light. She had high cheekbones and full lips and the kind of face that made you forget what you were about to say. She walked down the porch steps and across the yard toward them, and when she smiled, it was polite but careful. The smile of someone who was friendly but had learned to keep a wall up. I am sorry about her, the woman said. She has no concept of personal space. I am Brianna. Brianna Lawson. We live next door. Ethan Cole. He shook her hand. Her grip was firm. And she is not bothering me at all. She was just telling me I am old. Brianna pressed her lips together. Zoe. He is 32, Mommy. That is old. We will talk about manners later, Brianna said. She looked at Ethan. Welcome to Maplewood Lane. Your father was a wonderful man. Everyone on this street loved him. Thank you, Ethan said. That means a lot. Brianna nodded, and then she took Zoe's hand and walked back toward their house. Zoe turned around and waved with her free hand, and Ethan waved back, and then he stood there on the driveway for a long moment, watching the bright afternoon light fall across the two of them as they climbed the porch steps and went inside. He did not know it yet. He could not have known it. But that wave from a 5-year-old girl in a red dress and yellow rain boots was the beginning of everything. Ethan spent the rest of that afternoon unloading boxes. The house still smelled like his father. Old books and coffee and the faint trace of pipe tobacco that had soaked into the walls over decades. The furniture was mostly gone, sold or donated after the funeral, but the bones of the house were solid. Hardwood floors, big windows that let in clean white light, a backyard with a dogwood tree that was just starting to bloom. He had not told anyone from the company where he was moving. As far as his board of directors knew, he was taking a sabbatical and would be available by phone. As far as the world knew, the founder and CEO of Cole Digital Solutions, a company valued at over $300 million, was simply stepping back for personal reasons. Nobody knew he was living in a house with a leaky kitchen faucet on a street where children kicked pink rubber balls across the lawn. That night, he sat on the back porch and ate a sandwich from a gas station and listened to the crickets. For the first time in 2 years, the quiet did not feel heavy. It just felt quiet. And from the house next door, through the open window, he could hear Brianna reading a bedtime story to Zoe. Her voice was low and soft and steady, and he could not make out the words, but the rhythm was enough. The rhythm of someone who loved her child fiercely and completely, the way Ethan's father had loved him. He finished his sandwich and went inside and lay down on an air mattress in the master bedroom and stared at the ceiling. The clean white glow of the streetlight fell through the window and made shapes on the wall. He thought about his father. He thought about the woman next door with the careful smile. He thought about the little girl in the red dress who had told him, with absolute certainty, that he was old. He closed his eyes. For the first time in a long time, Ethan Cole fell asleep without checking his phone. The first week passed slowly, the way time does when you are learning a new rhythm. Ethan fixed the leaky kitchen faucet on Monday. He repainted the living room on Tuesday, a clean soft white that made the room feel open and bright. On Wednesday, he assembled a desk in the spare bedroom upstairs and set up his laptop so he could take calls from the company when needed. On Thursday, he walked to the hardware store 6 blocks away and bought a new mailbox because the old one had rusted through. On Friday, Brianna knocked on his door with a casserole. She was wearing a red cardigan over a white t-shirt, and her hair was down, falling in dark curls past her shoulders. She held the dish out with both hands. "It is my grandmother's recipe," she said. "Sweet potato casserole. I figured you might not have had time to stock your kitchen yet." Ethan took the dish. It was warm. You did not have to do that. I know, Brianna said. But your father brought me a casserole the week I moved in with Zoe, and it seemed right to keep the tradition going. Thank you, Ethan said. Really? Thank you. He meant it, and she seemed to know he meant it, because the careful smile softened for just a second into something warmer. Then Zoe appeared from behind Brianna's legs. Mr. Ethan, do you have any peppermints? Zoe, Brianna said. Mr. Harold always had peppermints. I do not, Ethan said. But I will get some. Okay, Zoe said. I will come check tomorrow. Brianna shook her head. I apologize. She has adopted you. I do not mind at all, Ethan said. And he did not. That evening, he ate the casserole at the kitchen table and thought it was the best thing he had tasted in years. Not because it was fancy or complicated, but because someone had made it for him. Someone who did not want anything in return. Someone who was just being kind. He washed the dish and returned it the next morning, Saturday, with a bag of peppermints for Zoe. Zoe opened the bag with great ceremony, selected one peppermint, unwrapped it, put it in her mouth, and nodded. Approved, she said. Brianna laughed. It was the first time Ethan heard her laugh, and the sound settled into a place in his memory that he did not even know was empty. Over the next 2 weeks, the small interactions accumulated. Zoe would wave to him every morning from her porch while Brianna loaded her into the car for daycare. Ethan would wave back from his kitchen window. Sometimes Zoe would run across the yard before Brianna could catch her, and she would stand on Ethan's porch and tell him about her day in great detail, covering topics that ranged from what she had for breakfast to whether or not ants have feelings. Brianna would come collect her each time with the same gentle scolding and the same apologetic look, and Ethan would say the same thing each time, "She is fine. I promise." One evening, while Ethan was sitting on the porch reading, Brianna came out and sat on her own porch, and they talked across the gap between the two houses. Not about anything important. About the weather, about the neighborhood, about the dogwood tree that was now in full bloom. Your father planted that tree, Brianna said. He told me it was for your mother. Ethan looked at the tree. She died when I was 12. Car accident. I am sorry. It was a long time ago, Ethan said. But yeah. He loved that tree. Brianna was quiet for a moment. Then she said, my grandmother lived on this street a long time ago. Before I was born. My mother used to tell me stories about it. Really? Which house? This one, Brianna said, pointing at her own house. She sold it in the 80s when she moved to Raleigh. When it came on the market 3 years ago, I could not believe it. I bought it the same week. That is incredible, Ethan said. It felt like coming home, Brianna said. Even though I had never actually lived here. They sat in comfortable silence after that, listening to the evening settle around them. Zoe was inside watching a cartoon, and the sound of it drifted faintly through the screen door. A breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass from somewhere down the block, and the streetlights flickered on one by one, casting clean white pools of light along the sidewalk. It was the kind of evening that felt suspended in time, where nothing needed to happen and nothing needed to be said, and that was exactly enough. Ethan had not sat on a porch with another person in years. In his old life, evenings were spent in front of a screen, reviewing reports or taking calls from overseas offices. The idea of just sitting and listening to crickets and the faint sound of a child's cartoon through a screen door would have felt pointless to him 6 months ago. Now it felt like the most productive thing he had done in weeks. Can I ask you something? Brianna said. Of course. What did you do before you moved here? You do not seem like the type who just retires to the suburbs. Ethan hesitated. He had been careful about this. He did not want people to treat him differently. He did not want people to look at him and see a dollar sign. I work in technology, he said. I started a company a few years ago. Software. That sounds stressful. It can be. Brianna nodded. She did not press. She did not ask what the company was called or how much it was worth or any of the questions that people in his old life always asked. She just accepted what he told her and moved on. Well, she said, standing up and stretching. I have a shift at 6 tomorrow morning, so I should get Zoe to bed. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Brianna. She went inside. The screen door closed softly. Ethan sat on his porch and watched the last of the daylight drain from the sky. The streetlights came on, casting clean white pools of light on the sidewalk. He thought about what she had said. It felt like coming home. He looked at his father's house, at the fresh paint and the fixed faucet and the new mailbox. At the dogwood tree his father had planted for his mother. Maybe, he thought, that is what this is. Maybe that is why he came here. Ethan went inside and opened his laptop. There were 43 unread emails from the office, most of them from his assistant and a few from the board. He scanned them quickly. Nothing urgent. He closed the laptop and went to bed. What he did not see, buried in the middle of those 43 emails, was one from Calvin Mitchell, his best friend and co-founder. The subject line was simple. Call me. Something is wrong with the Q3 numbers. But Ethan would not read that email until Monday. And by then, the quiet life on Maplewood Lane would already be starting to crack. Brianna Lawson was a woman who had learned to depend on herself. 3 years earlier, her husband Derek Walters had walked out. Not with a fight, not with a dramatic goodbye. He had simply packed a bag one morning while Zoe was napping and said he could not do it anymore. Could not be a husband. Could not be a father. Could not stay. He left his key on the kitchen counter and his wedding ring in the bathroom sink, and that was the last Brianna heard from him for 3 years. She had cried for 3 days. Then she had gotten up, washed her face, called her mother Janet, and started building a life without him. She picked up extra shifts at the hospital. She found a good daycare for Zoe. She paid her bills on time every single month. She never asked anyone for help she absolutely did not need, and she was proud of what she had built. But she was also tired. And she was also lonely. And on nights when Zoe was asleep and the house was quiet, she would sit on the couch and feel the silence press against her like a weight. She had noticed Ethan Cole the second he pulled that ridiculous truck onto the street. She had noticed that he was tall and had kind eyes and that he knelt down to talk to Zoe at eye level instead of talking down to her. She had noticed that he returned the casserole dish washed and dried with a bag of peppermints. She had noticed, and she had told herself firmly to stop noticing. Because the last man she trusted had left his ring in the bathroom sink and walked out the door without looking back. She was not going to make that mistake again. It started with the porch railing. Ethan noticed it on a Tuesday morning while he was walking to his car. The railing on Brianna's front porch was loose, hanging at an angle where one of the bolts had rusted through. It was not dangerous yet, but it would be soon. He thought about mentioning it, but then he thought about how Brianna would probably insist on fixing it herself because that was the kind of woman she was, and so instead he went to the hardware store and bought the bolt and the tools he needed. He fixed it the next morning while Brianna was at work. He did not leave a note. He did not mention it. That evening, Brianna knocked on his door. "Did you fix my railing? It was loose." "You did not have to do that." "I know," he said. "But it was a 10-minute job, and I was already at the hardware store." Brianna looked at him for a long moment. She seemed to be searching for the catch, the angle, the thing he wanted in return. She did not find one, because there was not one. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That was kind." "You are welcome." She turned to go, then stopped. "Ethan." "Yeah. I appreciate it. Really." The small kindnesses kept coming, from both directions. Brianna brought him leftover soup on cold evenings. Ethan mowed her front strip of lawn when he mowed his own. Zoe started leaving drawings in his mailbox, elaborate crayon creations featuring stick figures with enormous heads and tiny bodies. One of them was labeled Mr. Ethan and Zoe and Mommy, in wobbly letters, and all three figures were smiling. He put it on his refrigerator. Janet Lawson came to visit on a Saturday. She was a woman in her mid-50s with graying natural hair, wire-rimmed reading glasses, and a quiet authority that came from 30 years of teaching second graders. She showed up at Brianna's house with a bag of groceries and a rolling suitcase, and within 15 minutes she had reorganized the kitchen and started a pot of collard greens. Zoe introduced Ethan to Janet with great enthusiasm. "Grandma, this is Mr. Ethan. He fixed our porch. He gives me peppermints. He is 32, which is old." Janet looked at Ethan over the top of her glasses. She extended her hand. "Janet Lawson. You are Harold Cole's boy." "Yes, ma'am. Your father was a good man. He used to bring us pecans from that tree in the backyard." "Are you a good man, Ethan?" The question was direct and unapologetic. Ethan met her eyes. "I try to be." Janet studied him for a moment, and then she nodded once, and that seemed to be enough. She went back to the collard greens. Ethan understood that he had just passed a test. That afternoon, while Janet and Brianna were talking in the kitchen, Zoe came over to Ethan's porch with her coloring book. "Mr. Ethan, can I color on your porch? Mommy and Grandma are having a grown-up talk." "Sure. I will get you some lemonade." Zoe settled onto the porch steps and began coloring with intense concentration, her tongue poking out of the corner of her mouth. Ethan brought 2 glasses of lemonade and sat down next to her. "Mr. Ethan?" "Yes." "Do you have a daddy?" "I did. He passed away 2 years ago." Zoe looked at him. "That is sad." "I am sorry." "Thank you, Zoe." "I have a daddy too," she said, going back to her coloring. "But he lives somewhere else. He does not come to see me." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. "I am sorry about that, Zoe." "It is okay," she said. "I have Mommy and Grandma. And now I have you." She said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Ethan had to take a drink of lemonade to cover the fact that his eyes were suddenly wet. Later that evening, after Janet had gone to bed in the spare room and Zoe was asleep, Brianna came out to her porch and found Ethan on his. "My mother likes you," she said. "I am relieved. She does not like many people." "Then I am very relieved." Brianna smiled. In the clean white light of the porch lamp, her brown skin was smooth and her eyes were bright. "Zoe told me she colored on your porch for 2 hours. I am sorry about that. She is welcome any time. She was very focused. She is working on a picture of a horse that I think might be her masterpiece." Brianna laughed softly. "She has been talking about you constantly. Mr. Ethan this, Mr. Ethan that. You are her favorite person right now. She is easy to like." "She is." Brianna paused. "So are you, Ethan." The words hung in the evening air between them. Brianna seemed surprised she had said them, and Ethan was surprised to hear them, and for a moment they just looked at each other across the gap between the 2 porches. Then Brianna said, "Good night," and went inside. Ethan sat there for a long time. 3 weeks later, on a Wednesday night at 11 o'clock, Brianna's phone rang. The hospital was short-staffed. A critical care nurse had called out. Could she come in for the overnight shift? Brianna said yes, because she always said yes, but the problem was Janet had gone back to Raleigh 3 days ago, and Zoe was asleep in bed, and Brianna could not leave a 5-year-old home alone. She paced the kitchen for 5 minutes, running through her options. The daycare did not do overnights. Her friend from the hospital, Renee, was already on shift. Her mother was 2 hours away. Then she looked out the kitchen window at the house next door. The light in the spare bedroom was on. Ethan was still awake. She hesitated. She had never asked a man for help since Derek left. She had told herself she would never need to. But this was not about need. This was about trust. And somewhere over the past month and a half, without her even noticing it, she had started trusting Ethan Cole. She picked up her phone and texted him. I got called into the hospital for an overnight. I know this is a lot to ask, but is there any chance you could come over and stay with Zoe? She is asleep and probably will not wake up. The response came back in less than 30 seconds. Already on my way. Go save lives. Brianna felt her eyes sting. She blinked it away, grabbed her keys, and opened the front door. Ethan was already crossing the yard in his royal blue sweatshirt and pajama pants, carrying a book and a phone charger. Everything she needs for breakfast is in the fridge, Brianna said. She likes her toast with butter and her eggs scrambled soft. She will wake up around 7. Got it. If she has a bad dream, she likes to be held and she likes it if you hum any tune, she is not picky. Okay. Brianna looked at him. This man who had fixed her railing and mowed her lawn and given her daughter peppermints and lemonade, who had shown up at her door in pajamas at 11 at night without a single question or complaint. Thank you, Ethan. You have no idea how much this means to me. Go, he said gently. She is safe. I promise. Brianna drove to the hospital with both hands on the wheel and tears running silently down her face. Not sad tears. The other kind. The kind that come when someone shows you that you do not have to carry everything alone. Zoe woke up at 6:45. She walked into the living room and found Ethan asleep on the couch with his book open on his chest. Mr. Ethan, she whispered. Mr. Ethan, why are you on my couch? He opened one eye. Your mom had to go to work. I am making you breakfast. What do you want? Toast with butter and scrambled eggs soft. Your mom told me. Zoe climbed onto the couch and sat next to him. She patted his arm. You are a very good neighbor, Mr. Ethan. Thank you, Zoe. You are welcome. Ethan made breakfast. He burned the first piece of toast and had to start over, and Zoe watched the entire process with the critical eye of a restaurant inspector. But the eggs turned out fine, and Zoe ate every bite, and when Brianna came home at 8:30 looking exhausted, she found her daughter sitting on the kitchen floor drawing a picture of a man with a very large head making eggs on a stove. That is Mr. Ethan, Zoe said. He makes good eggs. Brianna looked at Ethan. He was washing the dishes. Thank you, she said again. Any time, he said. And I mean that. She knew he did. Ethan finally opened the email from Calvin on Monday morning, 3 days late. He read it twice, then picked up his phone and called. Calvin Mitchell answered on the second ring. His voice was tight. Ethan. I have been trying to reach you since Friday. I know. I am sorry. I am here now. Talk to me. The Q3 numbers do not add up. We have vendor payments going to companies I have never heard of. 3 of them. All registered in Delaware. All within the last 9 months. Combined total is somewhere around 2 million, maybe more. Ethan sat down at his desk. Through the window, he could see Zoe's yellow rain boots sitting on Brianna's porch, drying in the bright morning sun. Who approved those payments? Grant, Calvin said. Every single one of them was authorized by Grant Holloway. Grant Holloway had been the CFO of Cole Digital Solutions for 4 years. Ethan had hired him personally. He was smooth, precise, and always had the numbers ready. Ethan had trusted him with the financial backbone of the entire company. That does not mean it is fraud, Ethan said carefully. Maybe there is an explanation. I thought so too, Calvin said. So I dug into the vendor registrations. 2 of the 3 companies have the same registered agent. And that agent's home address is a condo in Buckhead that Grant Holloway bought last year. Ethan closed his eyes. Pull everything you have. I am flying to Atlanta tomorrow. Already done. I will have the files ready. Ethan flew to Atlanta on Tuesday morning. The flight was only an hour, but it felt longer. He sat in his seat with a notebook on the tray table and wrote down every question he needed answered. Who else at the company had access to vendor approvals? Were there more accounts they had not found yet? How far back could the forensic team go? Calvin picked him up at the airport in his green SUV. Calvin was the kind of friend who did not need to fill silence with small talk. He handed Ethan a coffee, pulled onto the highway, and said, "Everything is ready. Conference room 8. I moved the filing cabinet in there and locked the door so nobody stumbles into it." Good. Grant was in the office this morning. Asked me what the board meeting next month was about. I told him it was the standard quarterly review. He does not suspect anything. Not yet. But he will. A man who steals that much money does not sleep easy. They drove straight to the Cold Digital headquarters, a sleek glass building in Midtown. Calvin had cleared the small conference room on the 8th floor and laid out everything: bank statements, vendor invoices, corporate registration documents, and a timeline that showed the payments had started 11 months ago and escalated every quarter. The numbers were clear. Grant Holloway had created 3 shell companies and was funneling payments to them for services that did not exist. The total was not $2 million. It was $2.3 million. We need an outside forensic audit, Ethan said. I am not going to accuse him based on our own investigation. We need an independent firm to confirm this. Already got a recommendation, Calvin said. Mercer and Associates. They specialize in corporate financial fraud. We can have them start this week. Do it. Ethan spent the rest of the day in the Atlanta office, reviewing the evidence with Calvin, meeting with the head of legal, and making arrangements for the forensic audit to begin. He did not confront Grant. He did not even let Grant know he was in the building. This had to be done the right way: evidence first, board vote second, federal referral if warranted. No shortcuts. No drama. He flew back to Charlotte on Wednesday evening, tired and angry. Not the kind of anger that burns hot and fast, but the slow kind. The kind that sits in your stomach like a stone. He had trusted Grant. He had given him the keys to the company's finances. And Grant had used that trust to steal. When Ethan pulled into the driveway on Maplewood Lane, Zoe was standing on his porch. "Mr. Ethan, you were gone for 2 days. I had to go on a business trip. Did you bring me anything?" Ethan reached into his bag. In the Atlanta airport, even while his mind was full of spreadsheets and stolen money, he had stopped at a gift shop and bought a small stuffed panda with a red bow around its neck. "I brought you this." Zoe's eyes went wide. She took the panda and held it against her chest. "I love her. Her name is Patches. Patches is a good name." Brianna appeared in her doorway in her emerald green blouse, arms crossed, watching. She gave Ethan a look that said you did not have to do that and thank you at the same time. "How was your trip?" she asked. "Complicated," he said. "But I am glad to be home." The word came out before he thought about it. Home. He had called Maplewood Lane home, and he meant it. Over the next 2 weeks, the forensic audit proceeded quietly. Ethan made 3 more trips to Atlanta, each time staying 1 or 2 nights and flying back. Each time, he would text Brianna before takeoff and after landing, and each time, Zoe would be waiting on his porch when he returned with an update on Patches the panda's adventures. "Patches went to the grocery store today," Zoe reported on one occasion. "She sat in the cart. Mommy said she could pick one snack." "What did she pick?" "Goldfish crackers. Patches has good taste." On the nights Ethan was in Atlanta, he found himself reaching for his phone and texting Zoe pictures of funny things he saw: a dog wearing a bow tie in the hotel lobby, a cloud that looked like a dinosaur, a pigeon that walked in a very straight line across a crosswalk. Brianna would text back Zoe's reactions. She laughed so hard at the pigeon she spilled her juice. She says the dinosaur cloud is actually a chicken and you need to look closer. She says the dog in the bow tie looks like her school principal and she cannot stop giggling. These small exchanges, these tiny bridges of words and pictures sent across the distance, became the best part of Ethan's day. The fraud investigation was heavy and grinding and ugly, and every meeting in Atlanta left him feeling like he needed to shower. But then his phone would buzz with a photo of Zoe holding Patches up to the window to watch for his car, and the weight would lift just enough. Brianna noticed the change in him. She could see it in the way he came back from each trip a little more tired, a little more tense around the eyes. She noticed that he did not eat as much when he came home. She noticed that he stood at the kitchen window for long stretches, looking out at nothing in particular, his jaw tight. She had seen that look before. It was the look of a person carrying a problem they cannot share. She did not push. She did not ask. She simply made sure that when he came home, there was a casserole on his porch or a fresh loaf of bread wrapped in foil. Small things. The kind of kindness that does not need an explanation. One evening, after Zoe was in bed, Brianna brought 2 cups of tea to the porch and handed one to Ethan. "You look like you are carrying something heavy," she said. "I am. Do you want to talk about it?" He wanted to. More than she knew. But the fraud was confidential, and he could not put her in the middle of it. "There is a problem at my company," he said. "Someone I trusted did something they should not have done. I am handling it, but it is going to take time." Brianna sipped her tea. "Is it the kind of problem that has a solution?" "Yes. But the solution requires patience and doing things the right way." "Then you will be fine," she said. "You are the most patient man I have ever met." He looked at her. In the clean white glow of the porch light, with the tea warm in his hands and the quiet of Maplewood Lane surrounding them, he felt something he had not felt in years. Something that was not loneliness or exhaustion or anger. It was peace. "Thank you, Brianna." "For what?" "For the tea. For listening. For not pushing." She smiled. That warm, careful smile that he had been watching slowly open, like a door that had been locked for 3 years finally creaking ajar. "You are welcome, Ethan. That is what neighbors are for." But they both knew, sitting on that porch in the quiet evening light, that the word neighbors no longer quite fit what they were becoming. The black sedan pulled up to Brianna's house on a Thursday afternoon. Zoe was at daycare. Brianna had just come home from a morning shift and was still in her scrubs, tired, her coral tote bag over one shoulder. She was walking up the front steps when the car door opened and a man stepped out. Derek Walters. He looked different. Thinner. His sandy blonde hair was longer, combed back. He wore a pressed white shirt and gray slacks, the kind of outfit a man wears when he is trying to make an impression. He stood by the car with his hands in his pockets, and he gave her that same half-smile she remembered from 12 years of knowing him. "Hey, Bree." Brianna stopped on the steps. Her keys were in her hand. Her heart was hammering, but her face was still. "Derek. You look good. What are you doing here?" "I came to talk." "Can we talk?" She did not invite him inside. They stood on the porch, and Derek said the things she had imagined him saying 1,000 times in the first year after he left. He was sorry. He had been lost. He had been scared and stupid and selfish. He knew he did not deserve her forgiveness, but he wanted to be part of Zoe's life. He wanted to know his daughter. Brianna listened with her arms crossed over her chest and her jaw tight. Part of her wanted to scream at him. Part of her wanted to slam the door. But she thought about Zoe, about all the times Zoe had asked why her daddy did not come to see her, and she forced herself to stay calm. "You left," she said. "You left your ring in the sink and your key on the counter and you walked out on your 2-year-old daughter without even saying goodbye. I know. You did not call. You did not write. You did not send a birthday card. For 3 years, Derek. 3 years. I know. And now you show up in a nice shirt and say you are sorry and you expect me to just let you into her life like nothing happened." Derek looked at his shoes. "I do not expect anything, Bree. I am asking. I know I have no right to ask, but I am asking." Brianna stared at him. She thought about what Zoe would say. She thought about what Janet would say. She thought about all the books she had read about children and absent fathers and the importance of giving people second chances, even when they do not deserve them. "You can see her," Brianna said. "Supervised. I will be there the entire time. If she does not want to see you, it stops immediately. If you disappear again, there will not be a third chance." "Thank you, Bree. Do not thank me. This is not for you. This is for Zoe." Derek left. Brianna went inside, closed the door, leaned against it, and closed her eyes. Her hands were shaking. 20 minutes later, she was on Ethan's porch, and the words were spilling out of her in a rush she could not control. The whole story. Derek leaving. The morning she woke up and his side of the bed was cold and his ring was in the sink and his key was on the counter. The empty years that followed. The nights she sat on the couch after Zoe was asleep and stared at the wall and wondered what she had done wrong. And now this sudden reappearance, this man in a pressed shirt standing by a black sedan saying he was sorry as if 3 years could be folded up and put away. Ethan listened to all of it without interrupting. He sat in the wooden porch chair with his hands on his knees and his eyes on her face, and he did not try to fix it or explain it or offer advice. He just listened. When she finished, he said, "What do you need?" "I do not know." "Then just sit here. You do not have to figure it out right now." She sat. He brought her water. They sat together in the bright afternoon light for a long time without saying anything, and the silence was not awkward. It was the silence of two people who had learned that sometimes the best thing you can say is nothing at all. The supervised visit happened the following Saturday. Derek came to the house, and Brianna introduced him to Zoe with careful, simple words. "This is your daddy, Zoe. He wants to spend some time with you." Zoe looked at Derek with those big brown eyes and said, "Are you going to stay this time?" Derek flinched. "I am going to try, sweetheart." The visit lasted an hour. Derek and Zoe colored together at the kitchen table while Brianna watched from the doorway. She stood with her arms crossed, her back against the door frame, studying the man she had once promised to love forever. He was trying. She could see that. He was asking Zoe questions about her drawings, complimenting her colors, laughing at the right moments. But it was the laughter of a man performing a role, not a man who knew his daughter. He did not know that Zoe always started with the blue crayon. He did not know that she held her crayon in her left hand. He did not know that she hummed while she colored, a habit she picked up from Brianna. Zoe was polite but not warm. She showed him her drawings and told him about Patches the panda and about Mr. Ethan, and Derek's jaw tightened slightly at the mention of Ethan's name, but he said nothing. When Derek left, Zoe went back to coloring. She did not cry. She did not ask questions. She simply went back to her drawing as if Derek's visit had been no more significant than a trip to the post office. That concerned Brianna more than anything. A child who cries when her father leaves is a child who feels something. A child who does not react at all is a child who has already made her peace with his absence. What Brianna did not know, and what she would not learn for several more weeks, was why Derek had really come back. Ethan learned it first. He had asked Calvin to look into Derek's situation, not to spy, but because something about the timing felt wrong. A man who vanishes for 3 years does not just wake up one morning and decide to be a father. There is always a reason. Calvin called on a Tuesday night. Derek Walters' father died 6 months ago. Left a trust worth about $800,000. But there is a clause. Derek only gets the money if he has active custody of a minor child. Ethan felt his stomach turn. He is using Zoe. That is what it looks like. His mother, Patricia Walters, is the trustee. She controls the fund. Ethan sat in his dark kitchen and felt the slow anger return, the same anger from the fraud investigation, the anger of watching someone you trusted use trust as a tool. But this was worse. This was not money in a spreadsheet. This was a little girl in a red dress who still asked why her daddy did not come to see her. He did not tell Brianna yet. He needed more information. He needed to be sure. But the clock was ticking, and Derek Walters was not going to stop. Derek came for a second visit, and a third. Zoe was polite each time, but she did not warm up. She did not run to him. She did not ask him to read her stories or play on the porch the way she did with Ethan. She sat at the table and colored and answered his questions with short, careful answers, and when he left, she would walk over to Ethan's house and sit on his porch and talk to Patches the panda. "Mr. Ethan," she said one afternoon, sitting on his porch step with Patches in her lap. "Yes, Zoe. My daddy brought me a doll. It was very pretty. That was nice of him. But I like Patches better." She held the panda up. "Patches came from you." Ethan did not know what to say to that, so he just sat beside her and they watched the clouds together in the clean bright sky, and Zoe pointed out which ones looked like animals and which ones looked like food, and for a little while the world was simple and good. But the simple and good days were running out. Derek was building a case. And soon, he would make his move. The botanical garden was Ethan's idea. He had driven past it a dozen times on the way to the airport and had always noticed the sign, the one with the picture of the magnolias and the words, "Charlotte Botanical Garden, open daily." He had never gone inside. It had always seemed like the kind of place you go with someone, not alone. He asked Brianna on a Wednesday evening. They were on the porch, the 2 cups of tea between them, and the question came out before he could talk himself out of it. "Would you want to go to the botanical garden this Saturday? Just the 2 of us?" Brianna looked at her tea. "Like a date?" "Like a date." She was quiet for a moment. He could see the battle happening behind her eyes, the pull between the woman who wanted to say yes and the woman who had been burned. "Janet is coming this weekend," she said. "She can watch Zoe." "Is that a yes?" "That is a yes." Saturday came. Ethan put on his cobalt blazer and a clean white shirt, and when Brianna came down her porch steps in a lavender scarf and a coral sundress, her dark curly hair loose around her shoulders, he forgot how to breathe for about 3 seconds. "You look beautiful," he said. "Thank you," she said, and the careful smile was gone. In its place was something real and open and a little nervous. The botanical garden was bright and green, the paths winding through rows of azaleas and camellias and late spring hydrangeas in shades of blue and purple. The air was warm but not heavy, and the sunlight was clear and clean, falling through the leaves in patterns on the gravel paths. They walked slowly. Ethan carried the picnic basket he had packed that morning, sandwiches, fruit, sparkling water, and chocolate chip cookies he had baked from a recipe he found on the internet. The cookies were slightly overcooked, and he told her so. "I followed the recipe exactly, but I think my oven runs hot." "They are fine," Brianna said after taking a bite. "They are crunchy. That is the polite way of saying they are burned. They are crispy." She laughed. "Okay, they are a little burned. But the effort counts." They spread a blanket under a magnolia tree and ate the sandwiches and the slightly burned cookies, and Ethan told her about growing up with his father on Maplewood Lane. He told her about how Harold would wake him up at 6 every Saturday morning to work in the yard, how Harold believed that a man should know how to fix things with his hands, how Harold had never once raised his voice in anger. "He sounds like a wonderful man," Brianna said. He was. He was my whole world for a long time. When he died, I threw myself into work because I did not know what else to do. I built the company into something huge, but I was miserable. I was eating takeout alone in a penthouse and calling it success. He paused. He had never said that out loud before. That is why I moved here, he said. I needed to remember what a real life feels like. Brianna pulled her knees up and rested her chin on them. I know what you mean. After Derek left, I did the same thing. Work, Zoe, sleep, repeat. I told myself that was enough. And it was. For a while. And now? She looked at him. Her brown eyes were steady. Now I am sitting in a botanical garden with a man who baked me burned cookies, and it is the best Saturday I have had in 3 years. Ethan laughed. And then Brianna laughed. And the sound of the two of them laughing together under a magnolia tree in the bright clean afternoon light was the kind of sound that makes the whole world feel like it is exactly the right size. They walked through the rest of the garden after lunch. There was a pond near the back with a wooden bridge over it, and they stopped there and leaned on the railing and watched the koi swim in slow orange circles through the clear water. An older couple walked past them, hand in hand, and the woman smiled at Brianna and Brianna smiled back, and Ethan noticed and said nothing, but he filed it away in the growing catalogue of things he liked about her. The way she smiled at strangers. The way she listened when he talked, not just waiting for her turn but actually taking in what he said. The way she tucked a stray curl behind her ear when she was thinking. They wandered through the rose garden, where the blooms were white and pink and deep red, and Brianna told him about her grandmother Dorothy and how Dorothy had always kept roses in pots on the porch. Ethan listened and thought about the photograph he had not yet found, the one that was still sealed in an envelope in his father's desk, waiting. At some point, without either of them making a conscious decision about it, their hands found each other. Just fingers intertwined, casual and warm, as if they had been doing it for years. They did not talk about it. They did not need to. On the drive home, Brianna said, "Ethan, there is something I should tell you." "Okay. I am scared. I like you. I like you more than I have liked anyone in a very long time. And that scares me because the last person I let in left me standing in my kitchen with a 2-year-old and a wedding ring in the bathroom sink." Ethan pulled the car into the driveway and turned off the engine. He turned to face her. "I am not going to tell you not to be scared," he said. "Because I am scared too. I have spent 2 years running away from everything that matters. I am done running. But I am not going to rush you. I am not going to push. I am just going to be here. Every day. On the porch next door. With peppermints and slightly burned cookies. And whenever you are ready, if you are ever ready, I will be right here." Brianna looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached over and took his hand. "I am ready," she said. "I have been ready for a while. I was just too afraid to say it." He squeezed her hand. She squeezed back. Inside the house, Janet Lawson was standing at the kitchen window, watching. She had been making dinner, and the knife was still in her hand, a half-chopped onion on the cutting board. She watched Ethan and Brianna sit in the car, hands linked across the center console, talking about something she could not hear. She watched the way her daughter smiled, a real smile, the first real one Janet had seen in 3 years. She set the knife down and wiped her hands on a dish towel. She turned to Zoe, who was coloring at the table. "Your mama is holding Mr. Ethan's hand in the driveway." Zoe did not look up from her drawing. "I know, Grandma. I have been waiting for that." Janet shook her head and smiled. She picked the knife back up and went back to the onion, and if her eyes were a little wet, she would blame it on the chopping. That night, after Ethan had walked Brianna to her door and said good night, he sat on his own porch and looked at the stars. The sky was clear. The neighborhood was quiet. From Brianna's house, he could hear the faint sound of Zoe's laughter and the low murmur of Janet's voice reading a bedtime story. He thought about his father. He thought about the house and the dogwood tree and the porch where he had spent so many evenings. He thought about the woman next door who had taught herself to carry everything alone and who had finally, on a blanket under a magnolia tree, let someone carry something with her. He pulled out his phone and texted Brianna. Just 2 words. "Thank you." Her response came back a minute later. "For what?" "For being ready." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Then the message came. "For what it is worth, I have been ready since the peppermints." Ethan smiled. He put his phone away and sat in the quiet and the clean white light of the street lamp, and the stone of anger in his stomach from the fraud and the worry about Derek was still there, but it was smaller now. It was not the only thing he was carrying anymore. He was carrying something else now too. Something warm and real and good. And he was going to hold on to it as hard as he could. The forensic audit report landed on Ethan's desk on a Monday morning in August. Mercer and Associates had been thorough. 214 pages of documentation. Bank records. Wire transfers. Shell company registrations. The report confirmed everything Calvin had suspected and more. Grant Holloway had embezzled $2.3 million from Cold Digital Solutions over 11 months through 3 fabricated vendor accounts, all linked directly to Grant through a registered agent whose address matched Grant's personal property. It was not ambiguous. It was not a gray area. It was theft, documented line by line, dollar by dollar. Ethan read the entire report in his home office, the door closed, the bright morning light falling through the window. When he finished, he called Calvin. "I am calling a board meeting for Thursday. Emergency session. I need you in Atlanta. I will be there. Bring the Mercer report. Copies for every board member." Already on it. Ethan hung up and sat very still for a moment. This was the part he had been dreading. Not the confrontation, there would be no confrontation. Not the anger, he had worked through that weeks ago. What he dreaded was the formality of it. The process. Sitting in a room with 9 board members and presenting evidence that a man he had trusted had stolen from the company they built. But the process was the only way to do it right. No back-alley conversations. No threats. Just evidence, a vote, and a referral. He drove to the airport that afternoon. While Ethan was in Atlanta, Derek Walters made his move. Brianna came home from a shift at the hospital on Tuesday evening and found a certified letter in her mailbox. She opened it on the porch with her hands still smelling like antiseptic soap. Inside was a legal filing. Derek was petitioning for partial custody of Zoe. The words blurred on the page. Partial custody. Every other weekend. Shared holidays. A step toward full custody. Brianna sat down on the porch steps and read the letter 3 times. Her throat was tight. Her stomach was in knots. She pulled out her phone and called Ethan. He answered on the first ring. "Derek filed for custody," she said, and her voice was steady but thin, like a wire pulled taut. She heard him exhale. "When?" "The letter is dated last Friday. I just got it today." "Brianna, listen to me. I want you to let me help with this." "Ethan, I cannot ask you to." "You are not asking. I am offering. I know a family attorney in Charlotte, one of the best. Her name is Andrea Kemp. She has handled cases exactly like this. I want to bring her in for you. Ethan, that kind of attorney costs. I will cover it. All of it. And before you say no, please hear me. This is not about money. This is about Zoe. That little girl deserves someone in her corner who knows the law inside and out. Let me do this." Brianna pressed her free hand to her forehead. Every instinct in her body told her to say no, to handle it herself, the way she had handled everything since Derek left. But this was not a broken railing or an extra shift at the hospital. This was her daughter. And Ethan was right. Okay, she said. Okay. Thank you, Ethan. I will call Andrea tonight. Thank you. I mean it. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Andrea Kemp was on the phone with Brianna by Wednesday morning. She was direct, thorough, and calm, the kind of attorney who made you feel like the ground under your feet was solid. She reviewed the filing, asked Brianna 100 questions about Derek's history, and said, "We have a very strong case. He abandoned his child for 3 years. That is not something a court overlooks." Meanwhile, in Atlanta, the board of Cold Digital Solutions convened in the glass-walled conference room on the 10th floor. Ethan stood at the head of the table in his royal blue button-down and presented the Mercer report. Calvin sat to his right, a stack of copies in front of him, his face calm and focused. 9 board members listened in silence as Ethan walked them through the evidence, page by page. The vendor accounts. The shell companies. The wire transfers. The registered agent. The $2.3 million that had been siphoned from the company over 11 months. When he finished, there was a long silence. Then Margaret Avery, the longest-serving board member, a woman in her 60s who had been with the company since its first round of funding, said, "I move to terminate Grant Holloway effective immediately and refer all evidence to federal prosecutors." "Seconded," said another board member. The vote was unanimous. 9-0. Grant Holloway was called to the conference room 20 minutes later. He walked in expecting a routine meeting. He was wearing one of his expensive gray suits and carrying a leather portfolio, the picture of a man who thought his world was still intact. He found 9 board members, a CEO he had stolen from, and a stack of forensic audit reports. The head of legal read the findings aloud. Grant sat very still. His face did not change. He did not try to argue. He did not try to explain. The evidence was absolute, and he knew it, and the room knew it, and the silence that followed the reading was the heaviest silence Ethan had ever sat through. He was not given a chance to explain. There was nothing to explain. Security escorted him from the building with a box of personal items and a letter from the company's legal team informing him that all evidence had been forwarded to the United States Attorney's Office. Grant said nothing on the way out. He did not look at Ethan. He did not look at anyone. He walked across the lobby with his box and his leather portfolio and pushed through the glass doors and disappeared into the Atlanta afternoon. Ethan watched him go from the 10th floor window. Calvin stood beside him. "You did the right thing," Calvin said. "I know. How do you feel?" Ethan thought about it. "Tired. But clean." Calvin nodded. "Go home, Ethan. Go back to your girl and her kid. We will handle the rest from here." Ethan flew home that night. When he pulled into the driveway on Maplewood Lane, the lights were on in Brianna's house, and he could see the warm glow through the curtains, but the outside was bright under the white porch light. He texted her. "I am home. How are you?" "Better now. Andrea is wonderful. Thank you for connecting us. How is Zoe?" "She does not know about the filing. I want to keep it that way for as long as possible." "Smart. Get some rest. You too. Ethan." "Yes. I am glad you are home." He sat in the car for a moment, his hands on the steering wheel. 2 battles. One resolved today with a unanimous vote in a glass conference room. One still ahead, in a family courtroom, fighting for a 5-year-old girl in a red dress who just wanted to color pictures on the porch with the man next door. He got out of the car, went inside, and fell asleep on the couch with his shoes still on. Dr. Renee Foster found Brianna in the break room the next morning. Renee was the hospital's senior administrator, a woman in her mid-40s with short natural hair and sharp, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She had been Brianna's mentor since Brianna's first week at Charlotte Memorial. "You look like you did not sleep," Renee said. "I did not." Brianna told her about the custody filing. Renee listened, then said, "You have a good attorney?" "The best." Ethan found her. "Good. Then trust the process and take care of yourself. Zoe needs you steady, not falling apart." "I know. And for what it is worth," Renee said, adjusting her glasses, "that man next door sounds like a keeper." Brianna smiled. "He baked me burned cookies." "Well, nobody's perfect." Brianna laughed, and the laugh loosened something in her chest that had been tight for days. The legal process moved forward. Andrea Kemp filed a response to Derek's petition, documenting 3 years of abandonment, 0 child support payments, 0 contact, and 0 involvement in Zoe's life until his sudden reappearance. She also included Calvin's research about the trust fund clause in Derek's father's will. The hearing was set for October. Brianna marked it on the calendar and tried not to think about it every single minute of every single day. She did not succeed. But every evening, when the worry got too heavy, she would walk out to the porch, and Ethan would be there. With tea. With quiet. With the kind of presence that does not demand anything and gives everything. And Zoe would be on his porch, coloring pictures with Patches the panda sitting beside her, and the clean white light of the street lamp would fall across the 2 yards, and for a little while, everything would be okay. It was a Sunday afternoon in September when Ethan decided to clean out his father's study. He had been putting it off for months. The study was the one room in the house he had not touched. It was a small room at the back of the house, with a window overlooking the backyard and the dogwood tree, and it still had Harold's old desk, his bookshelves, and the worn leather chair where he used to sit and read the newspaper every morning. Ethan had kept the door closed because opening it meant admitting his father was really gone. But the house was starting to feel like his now, and the study was the last piece. Brianna offered to help. Zoe was at Janet's for the weekend, and Brianna had the day off. She showed up at his door in a red cardigan and jeans, her hair in a braid, carrying a box of trash bags and a roll of labels. "Where do we start?" she said. They started with the bookshelves. Harold had been a reader, a big one. History, biography, mystery novels, a complete set of encyclopedias from 1987 that were completely outdated and completely beautiful. Ethan boxed up the encyclopedias for donation and kept the mysteries. "Your father had good taste," Brianna said, holding up a worn copy of a spy novel. "He read that one 3 times. He said the ending was different every time. That is not how books work. I told him that. He did not care." They moved to the desk. It was a heavy oak desk with 4 drawers on the left side and a file drawer on the right. The top drawers held the usual things: pens, paper clips, a calculator, rubber bands, a stack of blank checks from a bank account that had been closed 2 years ago. The file drawer was more interesting. Folders labeled in Harold's neat handwriting: insurance, taxes, house deed, car title, medical records. Ethan pulled each one out, checked the contents, and stacked them in a keep pile. At the bottom of the file drawer, there was a manila envelope. It was sealed. Written on the front, in Harold's handwriting, were the words, "For Ethan, when the time is right." Ethan held the envelope and felt the hair stand up on the back of his neck. "What is that?" Brianna asked. "I do not know." He opened it carefully, sliding his thumb under the flap. Inside were 2 items. The first was a photograph. The second was a letter, folded in thirds. The photograph was old. Black and white, with the slightly yellowed edges of a print from the late 1970s. It showed 2 people standing on a front porch. One was a young man in a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves and a wide smile. Ethan recognized him immediately. It was his father, Harold Cole, maybe 25 years old. The other person was a woman. She was African American, around the same age as Harold, with her hair pulled back and a bright smile on her face. She wore a patterned dress and held a set of keys in one hand. Behind them, the porch railing was freshly painted, and there were flowers in pots along the steps. Ethan turned the photograph over. On the back, in faded ink, someone had written, Harold and Dorothy, Maplewood Lane, 1979. Dorothy, Brianna said, and her voice had changed. It was quiet. Almost a whisper. You know that name? Dorothy Lawson. Brianna's eyes were wide. That is my grandmother. Ethan stared at her. Then he looked at the photograph again. The porch in the picture. The railing. The flower pots. It was Brianna's house. The woman standing next to his father on that porch, 45 years ago, was Brianna's grandmother. He unfolded the letter. Harold's handwriting was steady and clear. Dear Ethan. If you are reading this, I have probably been gone for a while. I hope you found this when you needed it, not before. In 1979, my neighbor on Maplewood Lane was a woman named Dorothy Lawson. She was a single mother raising 2 children, and she was the kindest person I ever knew. That year, the bank tried to foreclose on her house. They said she was behind on her mortgage. Dorothy knew she had made every payment, but she did not have the records to prove it. I was a young accountant then, just starting out. I offered to look at her files. What I found was that the bank had made errors in their calculations. They had applied her payments to the wrong account for 8 months. Dorothy did not owe what they said she owed. She was ahead of schedule, not behind. I helped her put together the paperwork and present it to the bank. It took 3 months, but they admitted the mistake. Dorothy kept her house. She raised her children there. She lived on Maplewood Lane until 1986, when she moved to Raleigh to be closer to her daughter Janet and her granddaughter. Dorothy and I stayed friends for the rest of her life. She sent me a Christmas card every year without fail. The last one arrived 3 weeks before she passed. I do not know why I am writing this down, except that some things should not be forgotten. Good people help each other. That is the simplest truth I know. Dorothy helped me understand that being good with numbers was not just a career. It was a way to protect the people who needed protecting. This photograph was taken the day we got the letter from the bank confirming that Dorothy's house was safe. She insisted on taking it. She said she wanted proof that good neighbors still exist. I kept it all these years because she was right. Love, Dad. Ethan finished reading and sat down in his father's leather chair. His eyes were wet. He could not speak. Brianna was standing by the desk, one hand over her mouth, tears rolling down her face. My grandmother, she said. He saved my grandmother's house. Your grandmother's house. Your house. Ethan looked at her. Brianna, you are living in the house my father helped save. The weight of it settled over both of them like a blanket. 45 years ago, on this very street, Harold Cole had helped Dorothy Lawson fight for her home. Dorothy had raised her family there. Janet had grown up hearing stories about it. Brianna had bought it back. And now Brianna's daughter was coloring pictures on the porch of Harold's son, the man next door. The circle had closed. It had taken 45 years, but it had closed. Brianna wiped her eyes. My mother has to see this. We will call her tonight. They called Janet that evening. Brianna read the letter out loud over speakerphone, and Janet was silent for a long time. Then Janet said, Harold Cole. I remember that name. My mother talked about him for years. She called him the man who knew the numbers. I was 7 when all that happened. I remember the day the bank letter came. My mother cried on the porch. I did not understand why she was crying because she was smiling at the same time. Mama, Brianna said. She kept that Christmas card tradition going because she said you never let go of the people who stand up for you. She said Harold Cole was proof that strangers could be family. Janet's voice cracked. And now his son is next door, taking care of my daughter and my granddaughter. Ethan was standing by the window, his arms crossed, trying to hold himself together. He was losing the battle. "Mr. Cole," Janet said through the phone. "Yes, ma'am. Your father was a good man. And it appears the apple did not fall far from the tree." Ethan pressed his lips together and nodded, even though she could not see him. "Thank you, Mrs. Lawson." "Janet. You call me Janet." Brianna looked at Ethan across the room, her eyes still shining with tears, and she smiled. Not the careful smile. Not the polite smile. The real one. The one that meant she was not afraid anymore. He smiled back. Later that night, after the call with Janet, after the emotions had settled, Ethan placed the photograph on the mantel in the living room. Harold and Dorothy, Maplewood Lane, 1979. Two neighbors who helped each other. Two families connected by a simple act of kindness that echoed across 4 decades. He stood in front of the mantel and looked at his father's face in the photograph. Young and smiling and full of the quiet certainty that doing the right thing was always worth the effort. "I get it now, Dad," Ethan said to the photograph. "I get it." The dogwood tree rustled in the evening breeze outside the window, and the clean white moonlight fell across the floor, and the house on Maplewood Lane felt, for the first time, like it held everyone it was supposed to hold. The custody hearing was set for the second Tuesday in October. Andrea Kemp had prepared a case so thorough it could have been published as a textbook. 3 years of documented abandonment. 0 child support. 0 communication. A sudden reappearance that coincided exactly with the activation of a trust fund clause requiring active custody of a minor child. Brianna sat in the family courtroom in Charlotte wearing her emerald green blouse, her hair neatly braided, her hands folded on the table in front of her. Andrea sat to her left. Ethan sat in the gallery behind them, in his royal blue button-down, his face calm and his eyes steady. Derek sat on the other side of the courtroom with his attorney, a man in a dark gray suit who shuffled papers and avoided eye contact with everyone. The judge was a woman named Catherine Odom, silver-haired and precise, who looked at both parties over the top of her reading glasses before opening the file. "This is a custody petition filed by Derek Allen Walters regarding the minor child Zoe Marie Lawson Walters," the judge said. "Mr. Walters is requesting partial custody, every other weekend and shared holidays. Ms. Lawson is contesting the petition. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Andrea said. "Yes, Your Honor," Derek's attorney said. Andrea presented the case first. She was methodical and clear. She laid out a timeline that began with Derek's departure 3 years ago and ended with his sudden reappearance 6 months later, directly following the activation of the trust fund clause. She presented bank records showing 0 child support payments. She presented phone records showing 0 calls, 0 texts, 0 emails to Brianna or to Zoe. She presented a copy of the trust document showing that Derek Walters would inherit approximately $800,000 only if he maintained active custody of a minor child. "Your Honor," Andrea said, "Mr. Walters did not return because he missed his daughter. He returned because his daughter is worth $800,000 to him. That is not a father seeking custody. That is a man seeking a payday." Derek's attorney objected. The judge overruled. Derek took the stand and said all the right things. He was sorry. He had changed. He loved his daughter. He wanted to be part of her life. Andrea cross-examined him with the precision of a surgeon. "Mr. Walters, when is Zoe's birthday?" Derek hesitated. May something. "May 14th, Andrea said. "Did you send a card on any of her last 3 birthdays?" "No." "Did you send a gift?" "No." "Did you call?" "No." "What is Zoe's favorite color?" Derek looked at his attorney. I think pink." "Purple," Andrea said. "What is the name of her stuffed panda?" Derek said nothing. "Patches," Andrea said. "Your daughter carries it everywhere. A neighbor gave it to her. Not you." The courtroom was quiet. Then something happened that no one expected. Patricia Walters stood up from the gallery. Patricia was Derek's mother. She was 62 years old, with silver hair in a neat bob and pearl earrings and a kind of posture that said she had never slouched in her life. She was the trustee of the fund. She controlled the money Derek was chasing. "Your Honor," Patricia said, "may I speak?" The judge looked at her. "You are Patricia N. Walters, the boy's mother, and the trustee of the fund everyone keeps talking about." The judge considered this for a moment, then nodded. "You may approach." Patricia walked to the front of the courtroom. She did not look at Derek. She looked at the judge. "Your Honor, my husband created that trust because he believed in family. He believed that our son should be a father, a real father, before he inherited anything. That clause was not a loophole. It was a test." She paused. "My son has failed that test. He did not come back for his daughter. He came back for the money. I have watched him sit in this courtroom and fumble the most basic questions about a child he has ignored for 3 years, and I am ashamed." Derek's face went white. "Mother. I am not finished." Patricia turned to face Brianna. "Ms. Lawson, I owe you an apology. I should have been involved in my granddaughter's life from the beginning. I should have reached out. I did not, because my son told me you wanted nothing to do with our family, and I believed him. I was wrong." She turned back to the judge. "I am restructuring the trust. The custody clause will be removed. My son will not receive the inheritance based on using his child as a bargaining chip. And I would like to establish a college fund for Zoe, separate from the trust, if Ms. Lawson will allow it." The courtroom was absolutely silent. The judge looked at Andrea. Andrea looked at Brianna. Brianna looked at Patricia. "I would welcome that," Brianna said. "Thank you, Mrs. Walters." Patricia nodded. Her eyes were wet. She walked back to the gallery and sat down. Derek's attorney asked for a recess. The judge denied it. The hearing continued for another 30 minutes, but the outcome was already clear. Derek's petition was denied. The judge cited 3 years of abandonment, no demonstrated parental involvement, and a clear financial motive. She recommended that Derek could petition again in the future only after completing a parenting evaluation and establishing consistent, supervised contact over a minimum of 12 months. Derek left the courthouse without looking at anyone. He walked to his car, got in, and drove away. Brianna watched him go from the courthouse steps. He did not look back. Some things never change. Patricia Walters approached Brianna in the hallway afterward. She was smaller up close, and her eyes were tired. "I meant what I said in there," Patricia said. "I want to know my granddaughter. Not through lawyers or conditions. Just as her grandmother." Brianna studied her face. She saw something she recognized: regret. The real kind. "You can visit," Brianna said. "Start small. And if Zoe is comfortable, we will go from there." "Thank you," Patricia said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small locket on a gold chain. She opened it. Inside was a tiny photograph of Zoe as a baby, one that must have come from Derek's phone years ago. "I have carried this since the day she was born," Patricia said. "She has always been in my heart, even when I was not in her life." Brianna took the locket and looked at the photograph. Zoe's round baby face, those big brown eyes. She closed the locket and handed it back. "Bring it when you visit," Brianna said. "Show it to her. She will love that." Patricia nodded, pressed Brianna's hand, and walked away. Outside the courthouse, the October sun was bright and clean in a blue sky. Andrea Kemp shook Brianna's hand and told her to call anytime. Calvin, who had flown in for moral support, shook Ethan's hand and said, "I told you. Go home to your girl." Ethan walked Brianna to the car. She stopped next to the passenger door and turned to him. "It is over," she said. "It is over. She is safe. She is safe." Brianna put her hands on his face and kissed him, right there in the courthouse parking lot, in the bright white sunlight of an October afternoon. It was not a long kiss or a dramatic kiss. It was the kind of kiss that says, "I am here, and I am not going anywhere, and neither are you." "Take me home," she said. He did. That evening, Zoe came home from Janet's and found her mother and Ethan sitting on the porch together, holding hands. She stood in the yard and looked at them with her hands on her hips. "Are you boyfriend and girlfriend now?" "Yes," Brianna said. Finally, Zoe said, and climbed the steps and sat between them, and Patches the panda sat on her lap, and the three of them watched the sunset paint the sky in soft colors while the clean white porch light hummed above them. And Ethan knew, sitting there with Brianna's hand in one of his and Zoe's small hand in the other, that every decision he had made in the past 6 months, every burned cookie and late-night text and trip to Atlanta and quiet evening on the porch, had led to this. Not because it was fate. Not because of some grand design. But because two families on the same street, 45 years apart, had chosen kindness. And kindness, it turns out, has a very long memory. In the Atlanta offices of Cole Digital Solutions, an email from the United States Attorney's Office confirmed that the investigation into Grant Holloway was officially underway. Ethan read it on his phone, nodded once, and put the phone away. That chapter was closed. The right way. Ethan bought the ring in late October. He did not go to some fancy jeweler in uptown Charlotte or order it online. He drove to a small jewelry shop in a strip mall off Providence Road, a family-owned place called Brennan's Fine Jewelry, where a woman named Louise Brennan had been making custom rings for 40 years. He told her what he wanted. Something simple. Something real. A gold band with a single round diamond, not too big, not too flashy. "Who is the girl?" Louise asked. "She is my neighbor." "Your neighbor?" "It is a long story." Louise smiled. "The best ones always are." The ring was ready in 2 weeks. Ethan picked it up on a Saturday morning and put it in the small velvet box and put the box in the inside pocket of his cobalt blazer. He carried it with him every single day after that. To the grocery store. To the hardware store. To the porch where he sat every evening with Brianna. He was waiting for the right moment. He kept thinking it would announce itself, that he would just know, the way people in movies always seem to know. But the days went by and every moment felt both right and not quite right, and the velvet box stayed in his pocket, warm against his chest. November came. The air turned cool. The dogwood tree in the backyard dropped its leaves, and the branches were bare against the pale blue sky. Ethan raked the yard and Zoe jumped in the leaf piles, scattering them everywhere, and he raked them again and she jumped again, and this went back and forth for an hour until both of them were laughing so hard they had to sit down on the grass. "Mr. Ethan?" Zoe said, lying on her back in the leaves, staring at the sky. "Yes." "Do you love my mommy?" Ethan lay on his back next to her. The sky was very blue and very wide. "Yes. I do." "Are you going to stay forever?" "That is my plan." Zoe rolled over and looked at him with those big brown eyes. "Good. Because I already told Patches you are staying, and I do not want to be a liar. We cannot have that." "Mr. Ethan?" "Yes. My friend Amara at school, her mommy got married to her stepdad, and now Amara has a daddy who lives in her house. She says he reads her stories every night and takes her to soccer." Ethan looked at Zoe. She was picking at a leaf, not meeting his eyes, the way children do when they are saying something important and pretending it is not important. "That sounds nice," he said. "It does." She paused. "I wish I had that." "You know what, Zoe?" She looked at him. "I wish that for you too." Zoe held his gaze for a long, serious moment. Then she nodded, stood up, brushed the leaves off her lavender jacket, and said, "Okay. I have to go color now," and walked across the yard to her house. Ethan watched her go. He put his hand on his chest and felt the velvet box through his blazer. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning in mid-November, Ethan was standing in his kitchen making coffee when the doorbell rang. He opened the door and found Zoe on the welcome mat. She was in her bright red dress and yellow rain boots, her curly hair in 2 perfect puffs. She had that gap-toothed grin on her face. She was holding a piece of pink construction paper folded in half. "Mr. Ethan. I made you something." He knelt down. "What is it?" "Open it." He took the paper and unfolded it. Inside, in wobbly crayon letters that went uphill and downhill, were the words. "Will you marry my mommy? Circle yes or no." 2 big purple circles. One labeled yes. One labeled no. A crayon taped to the bottom with Scotch tape. Ethan looked up. Brianna was standing right behind Zoe. She was in her emerald green blouse and jeans, her dark curly hair in a loose braid, her eyes wide open. Her lips were parted. She was looking at the note in Ethan's hands. "Zoe," Brianna said, her voice thin. "Zoe, baby, what did you?" "I made it myself, Mommy. I practiced the letters 4 times. Ethan looked at the note. He looked at Zoe. He looked at Brianna, whose face was cycling between shock and embarrassment and something else, something that looked like hope trying very hard not to show itself. His hand went to the inside pocket of his blazer. "Zoe," he said. "Can I borrow your crayon?" Zoe pulled the crayon off the tape. "It is purple. Purple is my favorite color." "I know." Ethan took the crayon. He circled yes, slowly and deliberately, pressing hard so the purple was thick and bright against the pink paper. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the velvet box. Brianna's hand went to her mouth. "I have been carrying this for 2 weeks, Ethan said, still kneeling on the welcome mat, now at eye level with both Zoe and the woman he loved. He opened the box. The diamond caught the bright November morning light and held it. "Brianna Lawson. Your grandmother saved a house. My father saved a friendship. And your daughter just asked me the most important question anyone has ever asked me, and I circled yes. But I need to hear it from you too." Brianna was crying. Not sobbing, just tears running quietly down her beautiful face, her eyes shining, her lips trembling. "Will you marry me?" Ethan said. Zoe was bouncing on her toes. "Say yes, Mommy. Say yes, say yes, say yes." Brianna laughed. It came through the tears like sunlight through rain. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Ethan slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Louise Brennan had done good work. He stood up and Brianna wrapped her arms around him and held on tight, her face pressed into his chest, and he could feel her tears soaking through his shirt and he did not care at all, because the woman he loved had said yes and the little girl in the red dress was hugging them both around the legs and saying, I knew it, I told Patches this would happen." From across the street, old Mr. Henderson, who had lived on Maplewood Lane for 30 years, was watering his plants and saw the whole thing. He set down his hose and started clapping. The woman next door to him, Mrs. Okafor, came out on her porch and clapped too. Within 5 minutes, half the street was on their porches, clapping and cheering for the family on the welcome mat. Brianna called Janet. Janet cried for 10 minutes straight and then said, "I am getting in the car. I will be there by lunch." Ethan called Calvin. Calvin said, "About time, brother. About time." Patricia Walters sent a card the following week. It said, "Congratulations. Zoe is lucky to have you both." Inside was a check for Zoe's college fund. Brianna accepted it with grace and wrote back a thank you note. The rest of November was a blur of happiness. Brianna and Ethan sat on the porch every evening, her hand in his, the diamond catching the clean white glow of the porch light. Zoe told everyone at school that Mr. Ethan was going to be her daddy, and she brought the original note to show Antel, with the purple circle around yes, and her teacher, Mrs. Pearson, called Brianna that afternoon and said, "I have never seen a 5-year-old give a presentation with that much confidence." Janet came for Thanksgiving and cooked a meal so large that Ethan said he would not need to eat again until Christmas. Zoe insisted on saying grace, and her prayer was short and direct, "Thank you, God, for Mommy and Mr. Ethan and Grandma and Patches and this turkey. Amen." The wedding was planned for the spring. Simple. On the back lawn of 412, Maplewood Lane, under the dogwood tree Harold Cole had planted for his wife. Zoe would be the flower girl. Janet would walk Brianna down the aisle. Calvin would be the best man. Patricia was invited, and she accepted. On the first night of December, after Zoe was asleep and Janet had gone to bed in the spare room, Ethan went back into his father's study. He was looking for the photograph, which he wanted to have framed for the wedding. He opened the bottom drawer of the desk. The photograph was there, in the manila envelope where he had left it. But behind the envelope, pushed all the way to the back of the drawer, was something he had not noticed before. A second envelope. Smaller. Sealed. On the front, in Harold's handwriting, were the words, "To whoever finds this next." Ethan held the envelope up to the light. He could feel something inside, something thin. A piece of paper, maybe. Or another photograph. He turned it over in his hands. He thought about opening it. He thought about what might be inside, what other secret his father had tucked away in this old desk in this old house on this old street. But not tonight. Tonight, the woman he loved was asleep in the next room, and her daughter was dreaming in a bed surrounded by stuffed animals, and the dogwood tree was bare against the winter sky, waiting for spring. He put the envelope back in the drawer and closed it. Some stories are finished. Some are just beginning. And this one, the story of a man and a woman and a little girl with a piece of pink construction paper and a purple crayon, was both.